What is up guys, and welcome to my beginner's guide to the Hallowed Sepulchre. This is only my second ever guide, so feel free to leave any critical comments or anything like that in the comment section below. Just a couple of disclaimers before we begin. If you're looking for a method that will optimize XP and speedrun, this is not it. This is more of like a basic overview of what you can expect to find down there and some of the rewards you can get, and more orientate towards looting. So if you're looking to get your Black Graceful set, this will be a decent guide for you to get started. Secondly, I'll be covering floors 3 onwards in major detail, since the first 2 only contain single traps and should be easily completed. That being said, most of your Hallowed Mark looting will be taking place from floor 4 onwards, so keep that in mind as that will require level 82 agility. However, this guide should still serve as a useful tool for you to get familiar with the traps and mechanics for you to get started within the Sepulchre grind. Finally, for the purposes of this video, we will only be going with the use of tile markers to highlight safe areas. So if there's any specific plugins you use for the Sepulchre, do so at your own risk. I'll just be using the default plugins available through the RuneLite client. So let's jump right in. The Hallowed Sepulchre is an agility training minigame situated in the city of Darkmere in Mauritania. As such, it will require the completion of the Sins of the Father and all its prerequisite subquests in the Miracle storyline in order to access the city. This will require a number of your skills to be around levels 50 to the mid 60s, as well as having a reasonably decent combat level for you to defeat the final boss, Van Stromklaus. As well as this, the minigame is divided up into floors, much like the Pyramid Plunder minigame for thieving. Each floor has an agility requirement in order to access, so it has a corresponding level of 52 for floor 1, increasing by 10 levels each until level 92 for the floor 5, which is the final floor of the Sepulchre. So you'll need the corresponding level in order to access the floor you need. However, apart from that, the looting requirements are as follows. In order to loot the coffins, you will require 66 thieving, and for the various subdivision of the loot type, you'll need 56 construction, 54 prayer, 7 plus magic, and 62 ranged. Aside from that, I highly recommend Iron Man have 59 smithing in order to make a mithril grapple, as well as mithril nails for some of the obstacles you'll need to pass in order to loot the chests. Now I'll be taking you guys over the worn gear setup and inventory, but before we do that, the location of this place is in the northeasternmost corner of the Darkmere city. You can reach this place easy by using the Dragon Medallion and running north and east all the way to the northeastern corner. Be mindful of the Via Watch that will aggro you all throughout if you're taking that journey, and keep your prey melee up, you should be just fine. Whilst you're doing the Hallowed Sepulchre minigame, you're going to want to have the full Graceful set equipped in order to gain the run energy restoration bonuses, as well as the negative weight, which is going to help you to maintain a quick pace throughout the Sepulchre, because it is a run intensive activity. Secondly, you're going to want a Dorgashun crossbow or above in order to use the grappling shortcut. I believe anything from Mithril onwards will work just fine. One crossbow to not use will be the ACB, because the obelisks you'll be activating to restore your run energy at the end of each floor will not respond well to other gods, as I have learned. So yeah, just be mindful of that and don't take any other god items in with you, such as an unholy book, and you should be just fine. As well as that, you're going to have a mithril grapple to begin with in order to get across the ranging obstacle to get the loot. Later on you can upgrade this, but I'll go over the rewards you can buy from the Mysterious Stranger in a little while. For the amulet slot, you're going to want to wear a holy symbol that can allow you to regain your run energy at the end of each floor by using the obelisks, as well as using the spell from the Great Brain Robbery quest in order to cure poison. Finally, in the ring slot, you can wear a Ring of Endurance, although this is not completely necessary. It can help out at the very beginning when you're still using maybe a bit more run energy to get through the obstacles. A couple of useful alternatives might be the Explorer's Ring 4 to get you some emergency energy recharges, and then you can unlock yourself the Hallowed Ring, which will prevent you from taking damage a bit later on. But we'll go over those rewards and stuff like that in the meantime a bit later. Now that we've gone over your worn items, let's look at the inventory setup you'll need to proceed within the Hallowed Sepulchre. First of all, I've gone with a hammer and saw in order to build the construction obstacle in order to loot that chest. So you need 2 of a type of plank for the whole run. So I've gone with oak and the corresponding type of nail, so mithril. So these are pretty plentiful for Iron Man, although I have some others listed on screen if you want to try them. Secondly, take with you a couple of vampire dusts. These can be obtained by killing regular vampires or vampire sentinels, alternatively at the GE. If you're a normie, I believe these are still tradable. Yeah, but you can buy them for about 400 GP a pop, so it's pretty cheap. And next, this is pretty important, so be sure not to forget this. Bring a lockpick with you, or a strange old lockpick if you're a normie once again. That costs maybe about 50k right now on the GE. That will really speed up how fast you can open those coffins, and I believe reduce the chance of finding a poisoned coffin, so it's just going to make your speedruns a bit quicker. so take one of these with you for sure. Other than that, you're going to want some runes in your inventory in order to cast an enchantment spell of level 3 enchant or above, so just bring the corresponding rune you wish to use, and that can give you access to one more of the obstacles to loot something along the way. As well as this, when you're just beginning, you're going to want to maybe take a couple of emergency brews in order to bypass any damage you take, as well as a couple of staminas just in reserve for emergencies, because you might be getting reset a little bit more at the very beginning. And finally, you're going to want to take an anti-poison potion just in case you trigger the trap on the coffins, and you can cure yourself with that, or using the prayer book from the Great Brain Robbery quest as an alternative. That'll also be free of charge if you're wearing the holy symbol, so remember to bring that if you're about to use the book. So that's about it. That kind of goes over the inventory setup as well as the gear. Let's get into it. Let's look at some of the basic concepts for the Hallowed Sepulchre. Your ultimate aim should be to descend to the Grand Hallowed Coffin at the very end of floor 5, as this will be giving the most amount of hallowed marks. Remember that this place is time limited within the Sepulchre. Starting with a 2-minute timer on floor 1, it gains an additional 2 minutes per completed floor. Remember that if time runs out and you still haven't completed the floor, the entrance to the next level will be sealed off. As well as this, any lootable coffins on the floor will be locked. However, you will still obtain the usual amount of agility XP for the floor completion when you reach the obelisk at the end and click quick exit. So concurrently, you get about 10 minutes to complete the entire Sepulchre if you don't use the hallowed tokens. As well as this, obelisks found at the end of each floor will function as a full recharging of energy, so you can activate it as long as you're wearing a Saradomin item. You should get a full energy recharge for the next floor, so keep in mind you should be using this at the end of each floor. And remember this, if you ever get stuck, you can log out and automatically your character will resume the game within the Hallowed Sepulchre lobby. This can save you some crystal teleport shards that you can use for this place, so it's kind of a nice life hack, so keep that in mind. If you're ever frustrated or not being able to pass an obstacle, you can log out and then you can just reappear here rather than teleporting out. One very important game mechanic to keep in mind is that you will always prioritize pathing forward rather than to the side. So if you wanted to move diagonally to avoid the path of a bolt, and you clicked like this, you're going to take 3 steps forward before you take a step to the side. Therefore, if you need to sidestep a bolt, always prioritize side movement rather than going forward and then to the side. Lastly, and quite importantly, you're going to want to be on the standard spellbook for this place. That will allow you to cast all the relevant enchantment spells in order to pilfer that coffin on floor 5. So be sure to be on the standard spellbook if you're not already. If you're thinking about doing lunas for the poison, don't do it. Just stay on the normal spellbook and use some other means of curing poison. Now that we've gone over the fundamentals, let's look at the traps you will encounter down in the Sepulchre. Remember, this is all about timing, so the more you can assess the situation and find out which spot to get to next, that will be safe. The more runs you can do per hour, the greater the loot, the higher the XP. So keep in mind the traps you will encounter, and I'll try and go over some of the mechanics behind them. The first obstacle in your path you will come across most likely will be the Holy Fire Wizards. This trap will spray fire in certain predetermined spots that will cause small damage if you fall in its path and reset your progress on the current obstacle. Bypassing this trap may contain several safe spots in the middle of the Fire Wizard column, and I'll explain this a bit more in depth when we get to floor 5. Next up are Saradomin's crossbowmen. This trap will shoot between 1 or 2 projectiles, typically along a 3-tile wide path. The projectiles will cause small damage and reset your progress on the current obstacle. So the projectile shooting will increase in speed, keep in mind as you descend lower in the Sepulchre. To determine what tiles will be safe for you to traverse, you can keep your eye on the crossbowman statues, and one of them will light up, and that's the one that's going to shoot the next projectile. Sometimes there will be 2 that light up, so if the one that you're looking for the safe spot remains unlit, you can take that lane further and not take damage. So keep your eye on those crossbowman statues and you should be just fine. Next is what I like to affectionately call the Saradomin Boomerang. This trap will send a swinging Saradomin sword through a predetermined path, slashing players in its way for small damage and resetting your obstacle progress. It functions much like a boomerang, since once a Saradomin sword has reached the end of its path, this will be indicated by a sword tile. It will hover there for a moment and return to the Saradomin statue which flung it in the first place. There's a small grace period between when a sword returns, and this is typically when you will move forward, although not always, but I'll have examples of floor 5 and 4 swords included, so you can take a look more specifically what those mechanics look like. Penultimately, we have the Holy Lightning. These are lightning bolts which cover 5 tiles in an X pattern across a 3x3 grid every few seconds. These, rather than resetting your progress altogether, will briefly stun you, rendering you unable to move. While these don't cause damage, they'll leave you vulnerable when paired with other obstacles, such as the projectiles from the Saradomin crossbowmen. This can be encountered a few times on floors 4 and 5. Finally, the teleportation tiles. In the Sepulchre, you will encounter several tiles of blue and yellow colors. When inactive, these will stay unlit and can be crossed with no effect. When glowing with a blue or yellow aura, these tiles will activate, each with a different effect. The yellow teleportation tiles will send your player character back a few tiles, costing a second or two of progress, and are more of a nuisance than an actual breaker of runs. The blue tiles will send your player character forward several tiles, saving a few seconds on remaining time. We'll see these a bit later on when I cover floors 4 and 5 in more detail. Now that we've gone over the various obstacles you will face as you descend further in the Sepulchre, let's go over looting coffins for hallowed marks and what that kind of looks like. So mostly these will be located on floor 5 with one location at the end of floor 4 as well. All coffins require 66 thieving in order to access. As a rule of thumb, you always want to use a lockpick in order to speed up the chance of success of looting coffins in a Sepulchre, and this is becoming even faster with the use of the strange old lockpick and use no charges of that one as well. Keep in mind, sometimes you will become poisoned by traps on the coffins. In this case, it's useful to drink a dose of anti-poison or cast the Saradomin Cure spell from the Great Brain Robbery quest. The first of the obstacles we'll cover is the ranging grapple. This requires level 62 ranged, as well as a crossbow of your choice with a mithril grapple equipped in order to pass. Recommended is a rune or Dorgashin crossbow, both relatively common for Iron Men. You'll also see 2 pillars standing over a divide between the edge of the main Sepulchre path and the looting platform. You'll need to successfully grapple across in order to loot the coffin. Second up is the construction bridge. This obstacle requires level 56 construction. You will come across a platform behind a white hotspot for constructing this bridge, similar to conventional construction. Different nail and plank types may be used, yielding different XP in construction, but neither is more effective at bypassing the trap than the next. Therefore, I'd recommend using 2 oak planks in conjunction with a big stack of mithril nails, as you can fail at making this bridge without a hallowed hammer. Next up, we have the enchantment portal. This obstacle will require 7+ magic, although you will have 49+ from completing the Sins of the Father, so any enchantment spell from the normal spellbook may be cast. Therefore, you can have the runes required in your inventory. For example, for enchant onyx, I've got cosmics, earths, and fires. That will function just fine. So upon seeing a portal frame, you will conjure this enchantment, and therefore it will allow you to pass onto the loot platform. This also has the highest percentage of success without hallowed equipment, so therefore you can pass through the portal frame to reach the looting platform and pilfer the coffin as standard. And finally, we've got the Sacred Brazier of Saradomin, where you sacrifice vampire dust. This obstacle requires level 54 in prayer. You will initially see a holy barrier similar to the one when passing into Mauritania for the first time. You'll need to sacrifice 2 times the vampire dust to bypass the barrier and obtain the loot from the coffin beyond. Later, this can be reduced to 1 vampire dust if you're wearing the hallowed symbol. Now that you've got an understanding of where you're going to be looting, let's take a look at some of the unique and standard loot rolls from the coffins themselves. First and foremost, you're going to be receiving hallowed marks. These things are going to recolor your graceful, and the further down in the Sepulchre you go, the more marks you'll receive, especially from the Grand Hallowed Coffin, which can contain between 8 and 10 of these things. Speaking of the Grand Hallowed Coffin, let's take a look at the uniques. We got the Ring of Endurance, which is the most sought after item from the Hallowed Sepulchre. It's got a 1 in 200 drop rate, exclusively spawnable from the Grand Hallowed Coffin. This provides such great utility for stamina and run energy conservation that it's currently 43 mil GE price. It's got a number of uses in the game, so this is like the pinnacle of loot you can expect from the Sepulchre. If you get one, you could be walking away with some very big profit from this place. Up next, we have the Strange Old Lockpick, which allows players to bypass the inner section of the Barrow's catacombs, consuming 1 charge per door and allowing access to the Barrow's chest room from any desired starting location. Also drastically increases speed and efficiency of looting coffins within the Sepulchre, but it will not use any charges while doing so it's kind of advantageous to get this early on. Alongside the guaranteed loot of hallowed marks, pilfered coffins also may contain a number of useful drops. These should not be overlooked, can actually really lead to some decent money an hour. This can include things such as stacks of blood runes, Raynor seeds, as well as Sanfuse serums, amongst a number of other things. I suppose there's nothing for it now than to take a practical tour of floors 3 to 5 and show you how to bypass all the obstacles. Couple of notes before we get started. Make sure to do Sepulchre on a low ping world, of course. If you're going to be doing it on an Australian world, if you're from the UK, you're going to have a bad time, and vice versa. So make sure it's a fast ping world. Also, a couple of plugins that are helpful. Ground markers and tile indicators are going to help out a whole bunch. But yeah, let's get into it. As you can see here, the western rotation of the floor 3 on the Sepulchre is characterized by beginning with these projectiles. It's going to be firing 2 at a time, so it's going to be difficult for you to step on the right path straight away. So I'll wait 1 cycle before you step on it. So yeah, you can wait here and then take a few steps forward, and then it's going to be just a case of making sure the pathing is correct. Moving on to the wizards, there's a couple of safe spots you can mark here. Go ahead and mark tile 1. So as you can see here, the wizard is inactive currently, and on the other rotation, mark tile 5. So we're going to step on 1 right now, because it's going to be safe, we know that. And we can bypass the entire trap right now. And similarly, if it doesn't spray fire on the first one, you can move to tile 5 after the cycle finishes. So as you can see here, up ahead we have the first example of 2 traps joined. We've got a Saradomin sword in conjunction with some tiles. Now usually the yellows wouldn't be too much of a worrisome prospect, but it matters a little more on this one, so you should keep an eye out on which ones are active. So as the sword swings, you can either go or wait until it comes back, and usually you have way more than enough time to get there without using the blue tiles. So yeah, just be mindful of that sword and you should be just fine. Let's see if we can make it happen here. So we got a skip we can take also. That should maybe speed it up. See, you should never worry about the skip. But yeah, there you go. That's relatively straightforward. Might take you a couple of tries. But yeah, now we got a couple more crossbowmen. So same kind of example as the beginning of the floor. Just make sure you path out of the way of the bolts. Like such. So yeah, pretty simple stuff. Now we do have a Saradomin sword, so you're going to want to mark this tile closest to the pillar. And as soon as it's flung, you may proceed to the bottom of the staircase. You got a little alcove here to your west as well that you can hide behind if you're unsure if you've got enough time remaining. But it doesn't need to be behind the sword. You can also wait, as I say, you know, when it gets returned to the warrior, because you do have quite a long grace period. So it is really up to you when you go. But if it's in mid-transit, you never want to be making that move because you will get sliced. So as soon as we descend the staircase, we're going to be faced with the toughest obstacle on floor 3. This is right before the entrance to the 4th floor, so it's going to combine both the wizards as well as the Saradomin crossbowmen. So first and foremost, your positioning against the projectiles is key. So keep your eye on those crossbowmen. You're going to watch that mechanic go off where they get brighter before they shoot, and then you're going to step accordingly on the middle of the path or wherever you need to go to be safe. Now, the wizards are going to alternate their casting of spells, so the northern column will cast a fire and the southern guys will remain dormant. That's going to determine your safe spots. So I'll give you an example. The northern guys are going to cast now. After they finish casting, this spot, and this spot are going to be free. So that's the flame trail. Keep your eye on that and plan your path accordingly while watching the Saradomin crossbowmen. You've got 2 sets of these wizards to get through. But it should be relatively straightforward after a few successful attempts. So I'm going to try and step out now and live commentate what I do. I'm going to get onto the middle because it's going to give me a bit more room to react. I'm going to go north. I'm going to head to that one because they just went. I'm going to step south because those 2 just went off. I'm going to head now a couple more tiles forward. We've got 2 more bolts incoming on the same row, so we can stay here. We have got 2 more incoming, but we can go north. Now these guys have gone off, so I'm going to step 3 forward on the same path. We're still on the safe tile. More incoming to the middle, so we're going to step and head forward. Now if you're in the middle as you're finishing, you're going to want to wait for those bolts to go past because they can yoink you if you're very, very unfortunate. But that about does it for floor 3 west. Now 3rd floor east rotation can be characterized by some sets of fire wizard columns. These guys can be passed in one clean swoop from the very beginning. So just do like this and you should be absolutely fine. Now wait for the second set to go off. Pass it similarly. You've got another Saradomin sword, so you can go while it's in transit like such. Should be absolutely fine here. We still got a little bit of grace period left. So you can go either while it's being flung or after it's just returned. Pretty simple stuff. Up next, we've got projectiles along with teleporter pads. So first and foremost, your priority is going to be to dodge those projectiles. Don't worry too much if you land on a blue or a yellow that's activated. It will provide you a bit of a grace period if you land on a blue and you get sent forward. So you'll get about half a second of invulnerability to incoming bolts if you activate a blue teleport, but you shouldn't worry too much about it. So just be patient, progress slowly forward as you're watching where to step, and you should be absolutely fine. So I'm going to step out after this set of bolts all the way east. I'm going to take a few steps forward, go to the middle, incoming now from that side. We got another safe tile. They'll be activating now from that side. So you do have quite a bit of time on these lower floors to progress. Now, we're going to move forward a little bit. Step in the middle. And we got some more coming now. We can step right here since that was safe. Now a pretty simple Saradomin sword. We wait until it has been sent forward. Now we got 2 columns of fire wizards. The safe spots are going to alternate. So you're going to mark tile number 4. That is going to be where you step just after the first 4 wizards activate. Then you can complete the obstacle. Remember, they're going to alternate between the first 4 and then the last whole bunch. So you're going to always want to be on that tile where you're waiting for this to activate and then stepping forward to finish. And then when that's done, you're going to converge with where the western path finished and have the same obstacle to deal with the crossbows and the fire. Remember that there's a safe spot in the middle of those 2 pillars where you can rest up a little bit, just focus on the bolts and kind of plan the next steps, so be patient. Moving on, we'll start with 4th floor north. This is going to be characterized by your very first experience with lightning. Be sure to take the middle row so as to avoid having 2 chances as opposed to 1 of getting stunned. Next up, we got some teleport tiles with a Saradomin sword. After it gets flung, all you need is 1 teleport to get past into a safe spot, such as this. And you can move just directly to the right of the sword. Proceed through the projectiles and teleport pads. The most important thing on this obstacle is to keep your eye out for the safe spot and proceed. Rather than focusing too much on the tiles, which will cause a minor setback at the very most, you can kind of keep your eye on where the bolts are and proceed carefully. It might take you a few tries to get accustomed to dodging both, but overall it shouldn't be too difficult compared to what you'll find on floors 5 and 4. On this next column, the fire wizards, you're going to want to wait until both rows have activated like such. Make sure to mark tile number 4 on the southern wizards, as well as tile 2 from the end on the northern wizards. This is the 2 spots you're going to run to as they alternate. And easy as pie, we have made it to the next section. Up next, we got some projectiles with lightning at the very end and some teleport pads in the middle. Again, prioritize where the bolts are going to path first and foremost, and make sure you dodge any of the lightning as you progress further past the teleport pads. They're not going to really set you back too much because they're not as often spawning as before. So yeah, we're just dodging out of the way of the projectiles first. Now we got the lightning to also worry about, so you can maybe step onto like a safe tile such as this. You got some more bolts incoming, so yeah, just watch your pathing and you should be absolutely fine. Don't do diagonals if you can help it, but obviously you have to if you sometimes in the middle of the lightning. So there we have it, we've passed it, and now we're going to move on to probably the most annoying obstacle on both rotations of floor 4. So you're going to want to stand on this tile while the sword prepares. So we have a conjunction of 3 traps altogether. We got sword being flung by the knights, we got projectiles incoming on 2 rows, as well as teleport pads in the middle. Now the way you're going to do this that bypasses the need to use the teleporter pads is to go after the sword has returned to the warrior. That way it's going to be far easier, but still sort of difficult. So as soon as you see that return, you're going to path and want to go forward as soon as possible. Now you don't need the teleporter pads, but they do help. So I'm going to also show you the second method right quick. So for the second method is going to consist of going after the sword has been flung, and is more difficult because it's contingent on having to step on the middle teleport tiles because you can't bypass the sword otherwise. So you're going to want to be quick as possible and take the teleport pad as such. So this is going to be far more difficult than not depending on the teleport pad. Now we got some teleport pads here that will reset your progress if you step on the yellow, so try and avoid it. That also sends you back into the path of those bolts and Saradomin sword, which is not great. But yeah, we do have this old cove to the east where you can loot the Saradomin braziers. So make sure you have those vampire dust, which I forgot, in your inventory, and you should be able to loot the first of the 4 chests you're going to do. Floor 4 south can be characterized by starting off with a fire wizard trap, during which you'll always want to step on tile number 7, so mark the 7th one from the beginning. That's where you want to stand in between casts. That will be a safe spot until you can move on past this obstacle. Now we have some lightning to deal with, so as usual proceed down the middle where it spawns only once and get to the Saradomin sword obstacle. Up next we got a Sara sword in conjunction with fire wizards. Make sure to mark the tile I'm standing on. Stand here until the Saradomin sword has been launched. Always follow the sword. Be sure to wait a moment, this is important as it will prevent you getting sliced, and you can run directly to the start of the next obstacle. Next we have some bolts. This is pretty plain and simple. It's an extended path, so just make sure you watch your forward and diagonals and you should be fine. There's a safe spot available on the east side, so if you need a breather you can use that as well. So you can proceed down to the next floor as soon as you've passed this obstacle. Downstairs you're going to be dealing with one of the more annoying obstacles of this rotation, so just be patient and allow yourself plenty of practice to get past this one. When descending down the staircase you're going to see 3 traps in one. It's going to be Saradomin sword with lightning and some teleport tiles, I'm going to show you two methods to get past this. Method number one is waiting until the sword is flung, so we're going to wait a second here. Take the middle lane as well to avoid as much lightning as possible. Try to avoid the yellows if you can, and once you get to the second teleporter tile platforms, wait 3 sequences, so I'm on the third one right now, grab a blue, and you're going to get that temporary invulnerability just as the Sarah sword swings past you. Method 2 is a bit simpler, so I would recommend it for beginners. As soon as the sword returns to the statue, aim to get to the second set of tiles as quickly as possible. Any yellow tiles activated on the way will make it more difficult, so try and path around them, as well as the lightning. So then you want to activate the blue teleport tile as soon as you're able to. That will give you a lot of time to get out of the way of the sword and onto the next obstacle. So, projectiles with teleport pads up ahead. You shouldn't worry too much about activating tiles. Adapt as necessary whilst prioritizing the safe tile away from bolts. Remember to step sideways and not diagonally, and you should be just fine while stepping out of the way of the bolts. We also have these teleporter pads. Remember not to step on the yellows because it can path you back to the previous obstacle and reset 2 instead of 1, so that's good fun, right? And finally, as you can see, this little alcove, as previously, will also be in the same spot for you to loot the Saradomin Brazier. On to floor 5. It's going to have the hardest obstacles and the biggest rewards. Remember, the layout for this floor is always the same. Each time you pass through there is not going to be any variation in the obstacles. Pretty quickly, most will become muscle memory. First, we have a fire wizard column. Safe spots are always the same, so make sure you mark and move to these tiles. Tile 2, then tile 6, finally the third tile from the end, and then proceed on to the next obstacle. Up next, we've got the Saradomin sword along with the teleport tiles. As a beginner, you're going to always want to go after the sword has been flung. You're going to want to take the first teleport as well as the final teleport. Then head west into this little alcove surrounded by unicorns and the Icene statue, and then descend to the next part. After descending down the broken stairway, you'll have your first floor 5 looting location. Take the path east instead of straight ahead, and you should see the portal frame. Don't forget your enchantment runes. Resuming the standard sepulchre path, we've got the projectiles as well as the teleport tiles. Employ the usual technique of prioritizing safe pathing away from incoming projectiles. These should be shooting a little bit faster now that we're on floor 5, so that's one thing to be mindful of. And teleport tiles should only present a very minor nuisance if you step on the yellow ones. There are 2 potential paths through the fire wizards up ahead. Firstly, you want to step on the third tile after the first few wizards have done their circle of flames. After which, you want to move on to the 4th tile from the ending, characterized by a wizard that has a shrub growing next to it. Path 2 starts the same way as Path 1 on the 3rd tile. You can move 3 tiles ahead, and another 3 tiles ahead following on from that cycle. So you go to tile 6, and then tile 9, and proceed down the middle. Proceed down the middle onto the second set of statues. Remember that if you take damage here, you will also be reset to the very beginning of the fire trap altogether, not just these set of columns, so be very careful. Mark the 2nd tile, the 3rd wizard from the south, and the 5th wizard from the north. These are going to be your safe spots, so just follow what I did on screen, and you should be fine to proceed onto the Sarah sword with teleporters. This sword will be extremely similar to the one you encountered at the beginning of the floor. Just wait until the statue has flung it forward, and follow closely after, taking teleports 1 and 3. Watch out for those yellow tiles in the middle, after which you can step east into this little safe spot and wait until the sword starts pathing back to proceed. Before descending into the final section, there will be a looting platform hidden away to your right hand side after the Sarah sword. This is going to be the ranging obstacle, so make sure to have your crossbow and grapple at the ready. Ah yes, projectiles, lightning, as well as teleporter tiles. You should always prioritize moving out of the way of incoming projectiles. Try to avoid the first set of lightning by moving in between the safe spot tiles as necessary. Remember to keep your eyes on those projectiles as always. The tiles aren't too important if you get set back. All that matters is that you don't get hit by those bolts. And you should continue pathing much in a similar way towards the end of the obstacle. Step between those safe spots while slowly progressing forward. Just measure whatever time you need to take to get beyond this obstacle. Relax. Take a second to compose yourself. What's up ahead is by far the toughest obstacle in the entire sepulchre and will frustrate you to no end, so make peace with that fact before you proceed. In the first section, think of it as the end of floor 3 but in reverse. Therefore you won't be able to see the projectiles incoming by the glow of the crossbowman, so you'll need to adapt much quicker. Prioritize pathing out of the way of the bolts first as always. The west statues activating means the eastern will be dormant and vice versa. Use this to plan your route accordingly. It is difficult to do in one clean swoop, so try and take it in a few steps, and step away from the next bolt accordingly on each step. If in doubt, step 1 tile forward and out of the way of the projectiles. It's slower, but will save the time of failing. Once you've passed section 1, there'll be the usual lightning mixed with bolts from before, nothing you can't handle. First set of fire wizards will be far slower than those after the safe spot, so use this to your advantage and pass through them if you've seen the trap go off. Well done, you've made it to the middle. Rest up a second, you can move into one of the alcoves and assess what's ahead. When you make it here, one thought should be at the forefront of your mind. Bolts, bolts, bolts. Prioritize the correct tile to stand on always. The bolts will take you down if you stop paying attention now. The second set of fire wizards are going to cast the flame every few seconds, meaning you need to move as soon as you've seen the animation stop. Then it's on to the second set of lightning. Use the safe spots between the lightning spawns as you need to, keep your eye on those bolts and dodge accordingly. Almost finished. Remember to take your time rather than rushing and being punished big time. You still have the second set of fire wizards to go after the lightning. These will alternate as well between the west and the east activating, similarly to the beginning. The exception is that the final 2 wizards are always going to be casting the flame trap, so be careful of that no matter which cycle you're on. Edge forward carefully while dodging those bolts. You can keep your eye on the animation now to see which ones are coming next and predetermine your route. Once you're feeling confident, from about the middle onwards you can make a break for it, and as an added safety measure you can also step between the safe spot after you've passed the final wizard. Immediately following the crossbow statues, you'll see a white bridge hotspot up ahead, indicating the construction obstacle we saw earlier in the guide. Since you'll be likely short on time the first few attempts, I don't recommend looting this until you have at least 35 seconds on the clock, because you want to prioritize the grand hallowed coffin at the end for the ring chance. However, it's worth mentioning the chest is unique amongst the standard coffins in that it gives a double loot roll. As you can see on screen from that last chest, I earned over 100k GP. All you've got remaining from here on out is to jump across the final platforms onto the final section. Here you can find the grand hallowed coffin, and provided you have enough time left on the clock, you may loot this for that ring chance and other goodies along with it. So well done if you've made it to the end of the sepulchre. That is no easy feat, and I hope you have enjoyed this run through. And finally, I'm going to be taking you guys through some of the rewards that may be purchased for hallowed marks from the mysterious stranger in the Hallowed Sepulchre lobby. So first of all, there's Dark Dye, which requires 6 bottles to recolor a set of graceful to black, costing a total of 1800 hallowed marks. Second up, we've got some crystal hallowed shards that cost 1 hallowed mark each and enables players to teleport directly to the sepulchre, so it might be worthwhile for you to invest in maybe 5 or 6 of these for your full graceful grind. Next up, we've got the hallowed grapple, which ensures success when passing over the ranging grapple obstacle. This should be purchased in priority first if you're intending to unlock the full set, because this obstacle does seem to fail the most often. The next item is the hallowed focus. This ensures success when attempting the enchantment portal obstacle. Since this obstacle seems to fail less than the others, I believe this should be purchased last. We've spoken briefly about the hallowed symbol. This consumes 1 vampire dust instead of 2 for the sacred brazier obstacle, and you can purchase this at your own discretion if you don't mind paying the extra money or killing the extra firewatch. This is not really required by any means. Next, the hallowed hammer ensures success when attempting the construction of bridge obstacle. The hallowed ring prevents damage from being taken when failing an obstacle. This can be sort of pretty useful if you don't have the ring of endurance, could be worth purchase. And a hallowed token provides 1 additional minute of time to finish the sepulchre. Not recommended, you should strive to complete it within the allotted time. If you keep buying tokens, it's going to eat into your stack of hallowed marks. However, you can buy if you so choose. We've also got the dark acorn for the agility pet recolor for 3000 hallowed marks each. And finally, the hallowed loot bag provides a decent use of hallowed marks if everything else is unlocked, and provides some standard loot from coffins. Before I conclude the video, I just wanted to have some final thoughts regarding the sepulchre. First and foremost, it's a really good source of loot, both for Iron Man and normal players alike. I mean, that ring in itself is like 40 mil, like come on, it's so good. And for Iron Man, those Raynars, those Sandfuse serums, you know, blood runes, all kinds of really cool stuff. So it's like unique in that sense that you're actually getting loot while actively training agility. Speaking of actively training, it's really engaging and fun to actually complete the sepulchre. Believe it or not, you will be mega frustrated at the very beginning, but once you get those mechanics down and get to the final chest consistently, it is one of the best feelings in the game and a really solid minigame, very engaging. Among that, it's also the best rate of obtaining the agility pet, so any pet hunters out there, it's a 1 in 2000 chance for the squirrel upon exiting the final floor 5 dungeon, so definitely a good way to get a furry companion while you're training agility, so what is there to lose? And lastly, this is also going to be a pretty nice thing for you collection log completionists out there. There's 16 slots to fill, I believe, on the collection log, and most of them are really easily possessed by the hallowed marks. The only RNG thing on there really is the ring, so get out there and start grinding, you know? Why not? Start your Sepulchre grind today. With that in mind, thank you very much for watching this Hallowed Sepulchre agility guide. I do hope you have found it informative and useful to begin your journey into the Sepulchre, and I may see you all on the next guide or video. Take care. Peace.